Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO Politics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Please strap yourselves in. It's going to be a bumper crop, a bumper yield, and a bumpy ride maybe as well. Lots to talk to you about. I am going to be speaking about military aid news and what's been going to Ukraine, what is due to be going to Ukraine or being made in Ukraine or by Ukraine, and then we're going to talk about Russia as well. But there's a few other bits and pieces to go through alongside that. I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much for being a part of the team, and thank you to all the members and subscribers. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. You've got a little icon just popping up there, just there, and if that doesn't entice you, I don't know what will. Now, I have to just clear a couple of very important matters up first. The initial one is, let's face it, if you're Australian, you don't have to watch. Please don't watch. It's just too embarrassing to have you alongside me here and participating, because the Ashes was in Perth, 5-day test match, ended after 2 days. Absolutely incredible. We got tonked, so apologies there, Australians, but you're just not welcome. And I just had to give you an update. I spent a morning being rained on, miserable, as I saw both my I've got twin 15-year-olds. One boy plays football in the A League, and my other boy's just started again after 5 years, and he's in the D League. But he's still really good. He was in the Portsmouth Academy, or development team. And anyway, it doesn't matter. But 5 years later, he's taken up football again. He's playing with his mates in the D League, and they were playing a cup game today against a team that's above them. And they got tonked 15-0. Oscar got man of the match. He was like by far and away the best player on our side, which is lovely. But my goodness, I was sitting in the rain going, oh, I've lost count of the score now. This is terrible. Meanwhile, Finn, I drew the short straw. Obviously, Finn was in A League, playing a team below them, and they won 7-0. Finn was playing up front, scored a goal, played a blinder. Then he went to central attacking midfielder, and it was just fantastic. Two different experiences there with twins, and I unfortunately got the wrong one. But there you go. It's all good. I'm going to apologize to my Australian viewers if you're still there. You're welcome here. Of course, you're welcome here, but please don't mention the Ashes. Okay, now we are going to start. I mean, we've already started, haven't we? We are going to start with something that's not military aid, but I just came across it trying to get some last minute nuggets of news and wondering if I'd missed anything, and came across this, which is fantastic. It just came out after I did my hits and losses, so yeah, missed out on it there. Let me just make sure I've got everything sorted. Right, here it is. Quite incredible. Actually, see if I can put it. Yeah, let's full screen that. Incredible bit of footage here. This is the first time, I think, well, it's certainly the first time this has been caught on camera. The first time I assume it's happened. This is an FP1 drone. Now, an FP1 drone is, remember, the long distance fire point drone, which has, I don't know what it is, 1,500, 1,600 kilometer. Is it something like that? Not as big a warhead as the FP2 200 kilometer drone, big warhead, but I don't think you need a big warhead to do what this drone apparently did, which is, I assume, just, oh, look, there's a helicopter. Wasn't expecting that to be here. It's a Mi-8 Russian helicopter. We're supposed to be going and hitting, I don't know, a refinery or something. Let's have a little go at this. And although it cuts out as it gets close, as you'd expect, as they normally do, there you get the rotor blades of the Mi-8 helicopter, and I assume that's the end of that helicopter. Pretty incredible, that. So yeah, we hear Ukrainian Special Operations Forces use an FP1 drone to shoot down, or not so much to shoot it down, to take it out of the air, a Russian Mi-8 helicopter mid-air. That is a pretty impressive scalp. And Actually, it's great when Primari, the Ghost unit, comes out with their new montages, as they did this morning, and I included that in my hits and losses video. They took out a KA-27 attack helicopter on the runway there, and a whole bunch of radars and whatnot. 2 Nebo radars, which are, you know, those worth an awful lot of money, really good capabilities. Crimea must be, like, surely it's getting to a point where the air defense and radar coverage of Crimea is next to nothing. Like, just the primary group alone appears to be obliterating Russian air defense and radar capabilities there. It is, yeah, really good to see that. I get this, right? I'm really down, says Gareth Woznica. I'm really down today about Ukraine. Yeah, let's talk about that just very, very briefly first. I promise we'll get onto military aid and whatnot. Ukraine are in a really difficult situation, and they are in a very difficult situation because Donald Trump is one of the world's biggest idiots. And actually, it's getting to the point, I think I put something on Facebook, where it's getting to the point where the Trump administration is just outright evil. It's just outright evil. Everything they do is lacking in any sense of empathy or morality. And I'm sorry if you feel differently about Donald Trump. I'd be amazed if you're still here and feel the love for Donald Trump, and after listening to me week in, week out, have a go at him. But I'm every right to have a go at him, because what he's doing is heinous in terms of most of what he's doing with regard to domestic politics, I think, but also obviously with regard to Ukraine, where, my goodness, they have forced Ukraine into the most uncomfortable of positions. And Zelensky's had to come out and admit this, you know, very openly, to say that, hey, you know, it's either we lose our friends or we lose our dignity. And I hope that the decision is that they lose their friends but keep other friends, European friends. Now, we understand that tomorrow, Sunday, so this is how much of an emergency it is. Sunday in Geneva, EU is going to meet with Zelensky, with the Ukrainians and with the Americans, to discuss the peace plan, because it is nothing short of capitulation. Everyone appears to be pushing back on it, even in the most polite of ways. So someone like Lindsey Graham has said some of it's really important, but some of it's really very problematic. You know, if you've got Lindsey Graham, who's, you know, become a real cheerleader for Donald Trump, saying that, and you've got Nigel Farage coming out and publicly saying that getting Ukraine to force their army to in half or whatever, he said that's completely unacceptable. Now, if Nigel Farage is saying that, and Lindsey Graham is being somewhat euphemistic in what he's saying, then you've got problems. It seems that you've only got the Trump administration that is coming out and demanding this. You've only got Witkoff and Trump, and that appears to be it. And maybe Dan Driscoll, his man in Havana. Just yeah. So I am down too. I've been angry, very angry, but this is the moment for Europe to make it count. And so maybe what happens is Trump is put in his place. I mean, we can hope. So that's the most hopeful scenario. Now, all of the news I'm going to tell you, of course, fits into this context of, well, if the US forces Ukraine to sign a peace deal by Thursday, which is as horrendous as we all think it is, then what does it say about all of this assistance that is going to be coming in? What does it say about the development of ballistic missiles, whereby FP Firepoint are saying they're going to be Ukrainian ballistic missiles by the end of this year, and they're going to have other, I think it's the FP7, maybe the FP9 by the middle of 2026. Well, if they're forced to do a deal by next Thursday, and that deal completely forces Ukraine to surrender, what does it say about all this development? What does it say about all of these pledged articles? Obviously, they'll still come in and they'll still be developed, but yeah, you kind of want to see this stuff being used against the Russians. So there you go. Oh, Cheryl here saying, I've just watched Kyiv Independent on the internal scandal. They are demanding Zelensky's 5 managers must go. Yermak and Umarov are compromise negotiators because Russia and Trump have dirt on them. I did wonder about the choice of Umarov, and I mean, you can understand why they'd be chosen. That's kind of what their remit is. But given the state of play at the moment, they're very, I guess, it's all such a hot potato, and they are somewhat damaged goods. Umarov and Yermak. It's interesting that Zelensky's chosen them to be the negotiating front going forward in this most sensitive of times. So yeah, so much to talk about. Yeah, so Tom Fernby says, one of the 28 points is a snap presidential election. Why no election in Russia? Well, why? You could extend that to virtually every point. Why no concessions by Russia in any way? Why does Russia not have to stop striking Ukraine? Why does Russia not have to cut its own army down by 2.5 times? Why does Russia not have to do this? Why does Russia not have to do that? The whole thing is completely asymmetrical and one-sided. So yeah, let's try and be positive today and look at some of these developments in terms of military aid, and we'll look for the positives, knowing that these are very challenging times indeed for Ukraine. But I'll still be here reporting and hoping and advocating. Now, Sweden's foreign minister says EU imports from Russia have exceeded support for Ukraine by 124 billion euros since the full-scale invasion. Europe gave Ukraine 187 billion, but imported Russian oil, gas, and other goods worth 311 billion, which is really frustrating, isn't it? But I guess the question is, for the EU imports, who is doing it in the EU, and how much has that reduced over time? So it is moving in the right direction. 4 years is a long time. Could this have been done more quicker? Possibly. But certain countries have really gone to town on divesting and moving away from reliance on Russia. Certain countries haven't, of course, which will of course include Hungary and Slovakia. So anyway, yeah, that is frustrating. Now, Norway, as I said yesterday, appear to have come up with the goods or are pledging to come up with the goods in terms of coming to Ukraine's assistance as a result of the US demands. And I presume that this is something that has happened as a direct result. Norway just announced new action on aid to Ukraine and is moving to reallocate almost $1 billion to buy weapons as soon as possible for Ukraine on the open market. Norway plans to quickly send more air defense and artillery in line with the most urgent Ukrainian needs. Norway's in a very lucky position in that it does have quite a bit of money if it can dip into the sovereign wealth fund, but then can they do that? Either, you know, constitutionally, legally, whatever, politically, but they are in a more luxurious position than many other countries by point of fact that the war has earned them a lot of money through increased gas and oil sales and price fluctuations and whatnot. So let's have a little look here. This is a translation of an article, a Norwegian article. Government brings forward support to Ukraine until before Christmas. Quote, the situation is critical. 11 billion Norwegian kroner from Norway's Ukraine budget will be reallocated. So this looks like it is money that had already been set aside by the Norwegians that has then been expedited, will be reallocated now before Christmas to ensure faster arms deliveries to the country, the government announces. Quote, we are accelerating possible procurements of air defense and artillery. We do this because the situation in Ukraine is critical. They need regular arms deliveries, and this can help maintain the pace, says Minister of Defense Sandvik. Specifically, the plan to quickly purchase military equipment from allied countries such as the US, Great Britain, and Germany for 11 billion Norwegian kroner, because payments directly to Ukrainian industry have taken longer than expected. This is partly due to the need for control mechanisms to ensure the money goes to what it is supposed to. So if they spend it through Ukraine, give it to Ukraine, then, which is, I presume, what they're planning to do. I presume that's where they've reallocated it from. So we were going to give this to you, but actually, because you have to put loads of things in place to make sure that the money is being spent responsibly. I mean, think of the Energoatom scandal, right? So they're going to be making sure all the checks and balances are in place. Then that takes a lot longer. It's a lot less efficient, well, certainly in terms of time. So they're saying, look, we're going to spend this ourselves for you. So we're going to buy on the open market 11 billion kroners worth of stuff and get it to Ukraine. So the proposed changes entail a reallocation from support to Ukrainian industry to contributions through international financing mechanisms. This could be, for example, initiatives for the procurement of ammunition and material through NATO and close allies such as the US, Great Britain, Germany, Denmark, and the Czech Republic. Such support is one of the things Ukraine is asking for the most. It continues. The ambition is to achieve this before Christmas, according to the MOD. Or the minister. We know the capacity for delivery is quite good, he says, and we are in dialogue about getting it done as quickly as possible. So that's good news, really good news from Norway. Thank you, you Norwegian legends. Now, yes, sorry, just seeing some of the things being written about in the live stream. Zelensky said air defense missiles, a new agreement to strengthen our combat aviation, at least 515 million euros in support, and guaranteed gas supplies from Greece. These are the key outcomes of this week's visits to Greece, France, and Spain. So he's been around to a number of countries and got a bunch more support. Interesting stuff coming out from Greece. We're going to return to that later because it's co-production. So I've got it in the Ukrainian segment, but there is some good stuff coming from Greece, although interestingly, the Russians have actually responded already to that, threatened Greece, and then some co-production stuff with Spain as well. But we're going to go to Germany first. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Berlin has been working with Kyiv for months on long-range missile projects, and the Ukrainian army will be equipped with them. No details on numbers or timelines, keeping Russia unsure of Ukraine's real capabilities. Merz adds support will continue. So Germany says Ukraine to get long-range missiles. So obviously the question is Taurus, right? Euromind Press interprets it like this. Friedrich Merz confirmed that Ukraine will receive long-range weapons systems from Berlin, but refused to answer whether those systems include Taurus cruise missiles, citing the need to keep Moscow guessing about Western military support. Right, my position is I don't know, still don't know what the definite reasons why Taurus haven't been provided. My personal kind of, if I was to really lump for anything, it would be their own strategic stockpiles and it being Germany's best kind of missile. They don't want the tech to get into the hands of the Russians, rather than anything to do with ITAR and needing US permission, although that could be an issue. But if Germany are ever going to give Taurus to Ukraine, it's going to be now. But they have rather lumped for, I think, monetarily supporting Ukraine to develop kind of equivalent functional products, such as the Luti drone. I think they've been funding that, or maybe the development Ukraine, maybe FP Firepoint have been getting funding from Germany for the development of Ukrainian ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. So it could be that Germany's just going to really pile in to support Ukraine in that way. I don't know. So yeah, as I said, Vigo, yeah, it's not new money, it's reallocation. Yeah, I did eventually get there. So yeah, we might see Taurus for Ukraine, but we might not. Some people saying Taurus is off. Germany can't give it. I don't know. Yeah, there are so many different theories about this, but whatever it is, whatever help Germany give to Ukraine there in terms of distance munitions will be gratefully received, because really that's where Ukraine has to push their advantage at the moment. Not that it is a huge advantage, because actually Russia is better able, I think, to cripple Ukraine's energy infrastructure and just whatever, military industrial complex. at least it's potentially easier for Russia to do that because Ukraine is a smaller country than Russia, and they are able to hit anything in Ukraine with the existing weapons they've got. Ukraine is having to develop new weapons in order to do that back to Russia, and it is more challenging because they have to go further and so on and so forth. But actually, Ukraine is ramping up its production of these weapons, and they have had tremendous success. And so, going forward, if this war was to go on for another 6 months, you would hope that Ukraine would get to a position where they do have maybe an advantage over Russia in that domain. I don't know. Now, looking to Ukraine's air defense, here is part of Rheinmetall's CMD 2025 presentation. The Rheinmetall CEO Armin Papiga announced that the first Skyranger 35 Spags mounted on a Leopard 1 chassis will be delivered to Ukraine as early as next week. So that'll be this coming week. Now, the Skyranger is a Leopard 1 chassis, tank chassis. So it's an old tank chassis, but you don't really need it. The weakness of the Leopard 1 is its armor is quite weak, right, compared to the Leopard 2. But these won't be near the front lines. I don't think they'll be utilizing these closer to cities, so the armor is less important. It's about a little bit of mobility, but getting this decent turret and a fire control system, shooting down Russian aerial targets. So, as known since the 9th of September, Rheinmetall will deliver Skyranger 35 Spags, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, mounted on a Leopard 1 chassis to Ukraine as part of a 3-digit million-sum contract, which is paid for by an unnamed EU country through the windfall profits from frozen Russian assets. You don't know where the funding's come from for these. I'm going to actually open up deaid.org. So this is German aid to Ukraine. We were just reading his post there, but actually this is a brilliant website that details what's been pledged and what's been delivered. If we do a Control F and go to Skyranger, no, it hasn't got the Skyranger. What is it? So we'll have Skynex. So the Skynex, there are 2 air defense systems that have been given, and I think there are more pledged. We're going to come to this in a second. Yeah, another 2 have been planned. I believe those 2 are now fully there. So Ukraine has received all 4 Skynex is a claim, but there isn't the Skyranger here. I wonder why not. He might have called it something else. So I would like to know how many of these. I know we're not really sure, but I wonder if he's got just a question mark or a kind of guess at how many Skyrangers would be going, because these sort of weapons, if they got, say, I don't know, 20 Skyrangers, and you put them around, I don't know, some of these key facilities that don't have air defenses at the moment, that don't have the provision, maybe down in Ivano-Frankivsk, maybe in Lviv area, maybe around Lutsk or Pavlohrad or wherever. These are going to be so freaking useful. Because it appears that they are not too dissimilar from, as I was just mentioning, these Skynex systems that use the Oerlikon Mark III automatic cannon. So Ukraine received all the promised Skynex air defense systems from Germany as part of military aid, says Militiani. So it goes against German aid to Ukraine, still has 2 of them as pledged rather than delivered, but Militiani is now saying they've all been delivered, which would be 4 of them. So these are the palletized version. It looks like a slightly larger turret than the one on the Leopard 1 chassis for the Skyranger. The basis of the complex is a 35mm Oerlikon Mark III automatic cannon, which has an effective firing range of 4,000 meters, so 4-kilometer range there. Rate of fire is 1,000 rounds per minute. Pretty incredible. And actually, we saw some footage there on my Hits and Losses video. They released a montage of these palletized systems, although I think you can whack that on the back of a truck. These remote systems, so you can operate them remotely. I don't know if they're fully autonomous or whether they've got the ability for that, but I believe at the moment they're operated remotely. Or I think, you can be right next to them and operate them. But yeah, there was a montage of them taking out Shaheeds this morning. So these are being used and are being successful. And I imagine they're really pretty capable. So that's fantastic. Now, we come on to Trent Telenko, who is an American that often talks about logistics and whatnot. He says here, and he's often quite down about the US learning from the war, how they haven't particularly learned an awful lot in terms of drone capabilities and drone manufacturing. They need to keep up with what the Ukrainians are doing and learn from the Ukrainians. Here he says this is a startling demonstration of how far the USA is falling behind Europe in the age of drones. And this is an interesting area where actually Europe might be getting a bit of an advantage over the United States in terms of capabilities. The idea that Rheinmetall will supply Ukraine with more Skyranger 35 ADS on Leopard 1 chassis. The deal is worth several hundred million, blah, 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 blah. Rheinmetall Italia will handle the production and integration in Rome. That's interesting. So Trent Telenko continues with that. It's got a high rate of fire autocannon with programmable anti-aircraft fragmentation shells like the AHED or the BAE's 3P, and they are fundamentally superior technological approaches to drones than that of the radio frequency RF 30mm proximity fused shell fire from the low rate of fire chain gun. Pre-programmed shells don't care about foliage or other surfaces, which always set off RP's proximity fuses. They burst to kill drones when told to. So what he's saying is that the US must be relying on a similar sort of arrangement, but firing slightly different shells that are proximity shells, but they're not pre-programmed. In other words, I presume the Skyranger acquires a target, says that's where the target is, and you're programmed to explode when you get next to that target. And if you get near a tree, don't explode near that tree because you've recognized that something's nearby, a proximity fuse. You're going to go through the tree and then hit, you go through the foliage and then hit the drone that's now behind the foliage, right? So in other words, this is a better provision, better technology than what the US uses. And actually, it looks like Germany, and in terms of the Skyranger, but British and Germans in terms of the rounds there are getting ahead of the game and learning from the war in Ukraine in a way that he would argue the US isn't as well. And there could be a little bit of an advantage there for Europe. It'd be interesting to pit the Patriot PAC-3, which is supposed to be, good at taking down ballistic missiles, but has supposedly been struggling since the Russians have changed the way that the ballistic missiles operate. I think Wes O'Donnell did a good video on this recently, and you've now got the SAMP-NG, the next generation SAMP-T, which arguably will be the best in the world for taking, or at least the better out of those two. I can't speak for how good it will be against maybe the Israeli weapons, and I don't know what other ones. But it looks like I think there could be some success here for Europe in getting ahead of the game, but it may be kind of like swings and roundabouts that whoever produces the most recent bit of kit has the best bit of kit. So there's an upgrade to sort of PAC-3. Right. Zelensky said Ukraine is interested in partnership with Spain, and so we're going to hear a little bit about Spain, who one of those nations that hasn't really featured too much in terms of support to for Ukraine. But of course, Zelensky visited Spain recently. I think met with the royal family, met with Pedro Sanchez, the head of Spain. So anyway, here we have news that Ukraine is interested in partnership with Spain in the defense sector. And today, during a meeting with the heads of Spanish defense enterprises and the Minister of Defense of Spain, areas of cooperation were discussed. And we get a few piece of video of what they're looking at. Spanish manufacturers presented their developments: anti-drone systems, turrets, air and ground drones, long-range detection radars, ammunition. They talked about their production capabilities and possibilities of using weapons and their technical characteristics. We've already heard, I reported previously, that Ukraine had started making some, I think, mobility vehicles in Spain that were Ukrainian ones that had localized production in Spain. Anyway, we hear Zelensky saying that Spain will provide Ukraine with 40 missiles for the Iris-T air defense system. Spain has mobilized new military aid package for Ukraine worth 615 million euros, according to Sanchez. And the package will include supply of new defense equipment worth 300 million euros and a bilateral security agreement, which all amounts to 1 billion euros in total. So that is good news. Spain has turned up and helped out big time there. But again, the question is always, when do they get this kit? Now, Poland is joining the Pearl initiative. So this is one that can buy equipments from predominantly the US for Ukraine and will contribute $100 million there. The Polish Foreign Ministry has confirmed. So that's good news. It should keep the US on side. But I do wonder, and other analysts have been talking about whether if Ukraine doesn't do what Trump wants them to do and doesn't sign this deal by next Thursday, and if the US then comes true on withdrawing from support to Ukraine, such as intelligence supports and other military aid that may still be trickling through, does this also put into jeopardy things that have been ordered from the US through the Pearl Initiative and so on and so forth? That would be punishing their own military industrial base and would also be really controversial, because is that, hang on, we're buying stuff and now you're saying we can't, and so on and so forth. Like, where will the US stand if Ukraine do not commit to what is looking like a terrible, terrible deal? Yeah, there's a G20 meeting at the moment in South Africa where Trump decided not to go in the end. G20, no Trump, no Vance, I guess, two chickens to face the music. We just seeing this Project 2025 desire for the US to become more and more isolated, and they start putting up such ridiculous objectives and ridiculous 28-point peace plans and whatnot for Ukraine, to the point where Ukraine says we can't do this, and then Europe says we can't agree to this either, and then it forces the US into a greater and greater isolation. And that's exactly actually what Project 2025 want. Like this peace deal, there is an argument to suggest that some Americans might be thinking this peace deal is so bad that no one would sign up for it, and it gives us an excuse to pull out of supporting Ukraine and to pull out of actually providing security in Europe, pulling American NATO troops out of European nations. This is just possibly an excuse to expedite that kind of move, and then they get their isolationism. But of course, it's very difficult for an America that's so isolated to also say, yeah, we're the strongest in the world. Yeah, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, you could say we needed to do this and we need to do that, and you could have leverage over us when you had presence in Europe and when you were helping as an alliance Ukraine. But now you're on your own over there. You don't get to tell us what to do now, and you can't demand that we do this in foreign policy terms. You've isolated yourself, which means you don't have soft power or hard power around the world, and you're on your own over there. And then 10 years later, it's very difficult to you to stand up and say, USA, we're the best at everything in the world, and we are the number one player in the world. No, you've kind of removed yourself from the international stage with your isolationism. So there could, we've talked about this plenty of times before. Anyway, I digress. Canada, let's go on to Canada. Canadian government has sent Ukraine a shipment of armored personnel carriers and components to enhance the capabilities of Ukrainian fighter jets. That's really good news. I don't know what jets they would be, but I'd hope it'd be F-16s. The aid package includes 25 M113 armored personnel carriers, and approximately 75,000 spare parts from surplus Canadian Forces equipment. Stuff like that's going to be so useful for the Ukrainians. Canada is also transferring 125 AIM-7 air-to-air missile components and 38 LAU-7A launchers. Canada is providing $30 million for winter equipment, 34,231 sleeping bags, 51,679 winter jackets, 9,000 odd items of warm clothing, 22,500 pairs of winter boots, and 78,500 pairs of wet weather winter boots as well. So, all really useful stuff. And things like M113s, you might think they're old and a bit beyond it, but they do get used really well by the Ukrainians. Lots of people talking about this. 150,000 pieces of winter equipment, $30 million worth $30 million to Ukraine, 25 M113s, so on and so forth. Good news there. Thank you, Canada. And Ireland have turned up with the goods. I did report on these radars going to Ukraine some time back, and now we hear confirmation of this. Ukraine has received 5 radar stations from Ireland. They're the Giraffe. So it's a type of which has not been officially disclosed, according to Militiani, but we've got a pretty good idea that they are the Giraffe radar systems. In recent months, Ukraine has received 34 vehicles from Ireland, including ambulances, fire engines, and these 5 radar stations. So Ireland quietly getting on and doing this, as Euromonitor Press says. Ireland quietly delivers 5 radar systems to Ukraine alongside ambulances and demining robots. Ireland gave Ukraine 5 of its 7 air defense radars, depleting most of its own early warning capability. The Giraffe Mark IV system detects low-flying targets at 50 kilometers and is part of a $76 million military aid package from a country with a minimal defense inventory. So, as a neutral country, they don't have an awful lot they can give, and they would prefer, I think, usually to be very much about humanitarian aid. But actually, you can argue that radar systems, air defense radar systems, are about humanitarian aid. They defend these urban areas from attacks from the Russians in terms of Shaheds slamming into civilian infrastructure, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, the US here, one of the most important decisions today, said Tim White the other day, the 18th, so 4 days ago, has come from the US, where the State Department has approved selling maintenance equipment. So again, this is not an aid package from the US. This is them selling stuff to other countries who are helping, and spare parts package for Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. It will cost $105 million, but the upgrade should significantly help protect lives. So I'm wondering whether this upgrade that to the air defense system, the Patriot air defense system, might be to try and deal with the changing trajectories and flight paths of the Russian ballistic missiles and whatnot. But anyway, that has been approved, so that's good news. And then we hear that American Merritt's anti-aircraft drone complex has intercepted more than 1,000 Shahed-like drones in the sky over Ukraine, according to Militiani. The complex, created as part of the American Project Eagle initiative, has attracted the attention of NATO countries due to its successful use in Ukraine. So although Trent Telenko might be someone who consistently, as an American, decries the lack of foresight from the American MOD or Department of Defense, and seeing America's behind the curve on many things. Here is an example of where America is, at the forefront of developing anti-Shahed drone capabilities, and they appear to be being used pretty effectively by the Ukrainians. Now, French-based rail transport system manufacturer Alstom has been awarded a $470 million contract, or is that euro, to deliver 55 Trax electric locomotives to Ukraine, financed by the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development and the World Bank. That's really good news for that particular manufacturer. You can imagine 55 locomotives. That order book is looking very healthy. Now, the challenge for reliance on electric locomotives is if the transformer or the electric system gets done in there, then, as in the overhead electric wires and whatnot, then it means that trains can be rendered useless. So they do need diesel locomotive backup for sure. And I wonder how well they're doing for that. Okay, now we're moving on to, well, going back to America, actually, I should have had this earlier. Former US ambassador to Estonia, a chap called George Kent, has raised over $100,000 to support Ukraine with the help of his wife, Velida. He purchased and delivered 37 vehicles for Ukrainian military units. That's absolutely fantastic. Really has done a good job there. And it looks like that's all NATO equipment. At least he's standing by some NATO vehicles there. So anyway, that is fabulous. You know, if only your government could be doing similar things there. So this is a message from Svitlana Zalischuk, who says, deeply moved. ATPGEO, Sweden's largest online pharmacy, is sending 250 combat medical backpacks worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, bringing the total of 1,000 alongside 19 truckloads of aid worth over $3.4 million. Sweden's solidarity saves lives. So that's really fantastic. There are so many. And, you know, I only give you a mere like soupçon of aid that goes to Ukraine in terms of particularly the smaller aid packages and convoys and projects that so many different entities are involved with. You know, we can talk about Jake Bro and the amount of trucks that he has fundraised for to go to Ukraine. We can talk about all sorts of different entities helping out Ukraine. But, you know, this is reflective of the very many great things that people are doing. In this case, it's ATPGEO, Sweden's largest online pharmacy, really coming up with good stuff. Now, we've got a video here. I'm going to show this to you. It won't have sound because of the way I am sharing this at the moment. But this is Ukrainian chap firing a man-pad, a man-portable air defense system that goes off into the distance and blows up a cruise missile, I believe, which is fantastic there. Now, what's significant about this is reported as a downing of a KH-101 cruise missile the other morning using a Chinese FN-6 man-pad. There's no public information confirming that this system has been supplied to or used by Ukraine, making this a notable development. Quite a lot of kit gets to Ukraine by being bought off, you know, the international market or whatever. This will have nothing to do with China. Somebody was saying in one thread I was watching that the puff of smoke at the beginning there would indicate that this is nearer the end of its life. So, you know, it could be that was a piece of kit that needed to be I don't know, decommissioned or whatever, but actually let's buy it cheaply and get it to Ukraine. And look, it's good. It's taken out a cruise missile, so success there for a Chinese piece of equipment. Then we hear that F-16s, Ukraine's F-16s have carried out more than 300 strikes on Russian ground targets, according to the Air Force, since arriving in August 2024. And they've been hitting Russia using Russians in occupied territories mainly, but they do actually use guided glide bombs as well, and SDBs, these GBU-39 small diameter bombs inside places like Kursk and probably Belgorod as well. They've been hitting Russians using those bombs and JDAM ER kits and intercepted over 1,300 Russian missiles and drones since entering service. So 300 strikes on ground targets, 1,300 successful interceptions in the air. I don't know whether, I said this to you the other day, I don't know whether that means there's a strict 300 to 1,300 ratio for ground sorties to aerial sorties. It could be that actually they carry fewer ground attack munitions than they do aerial attack munitions. So one sortie in the air defensively could take down far more aerial targets than they take out with, you know, a ground attack sortie. Anyway, you get the point that they're being used for both, but probably historically more defensively than offensively. Okay, now we are going to move on to, I've got a whole section for UK because there's quite a bit to go through with you regarding the UK. EDAMs are better than JDAMs. So the EDAMs are these newer ones that have been created especially for Ukraine by the Americans, and they've been bought off the Americans, and I believe they started to be delivered from October onwards, and I haven't heard of any usage of them yet, but I presume they are being used. Pretty sure that will sometimes when nations say, sometimes when nations pledge and give equipment to Ukraine, there are some strings attached whereby they say you can't show footage of this because it's secretive. We either don't want people to know that we've given this to you, or we want its effect to be kept secret, and so on and so forth. So yeah. Scruffy Tales in the live chat. Thanks, Scruffy, for I'm so long overdue in terms of doing a frontline update. I wanted to do one today, but I don't think I'm going to get time. Which means it's probably going to be like a 2-week update and show like masses of movement along the front line. Anyway, we're going to go to the UK now. So the UK will build a network of new munitions. In fact, I'm going to have to change the way I do this, so I want to play you sound in a second. So let's get that back up in a way that I can share the sound with you. Here we go. Okay, so I have to share these individually. The UK will build a network of new munitions factories to strengthen war readiness and support Ukraine, according to Reuters. £1.5 billion in new funding. At least 13 sites are planned. The factories will produce explosives, propellants, pyrotechnics, and other key components. And this is one of those things where you, like I was saying at the beginning of the video, if there is a sudden, quick ceasefire and peace deal that gets put into place starting next Thursday, or starting relatively soon, then what does it say about commitments like this? If Britain goes, right, we're going to put £1.5 billion of new funding into 13 sites to keep supplying Ukraine, then suddenly the war stops, and you're like, okay, what happens with all this stuff that these new sites that we, and I'm not saying that the war should continue in order to make financial sense for the people who are supporting Ukraine in some kind of cynical military industrial complex, grease people's, line people's pockets type thing. But there are commitments to Ukraine whereby hopefully Ukraine then starts getting the advantage on the battlefield, and then suddenly, what happens here? Anyway, that's good news that UK is doing that. In fact, we're going to go next to talk of a new Suffolk drone plant that I actually previously reported to you. This is the local MP, James Cartledge, who is
drones are transforming warfare.
A Conservative Party MP from Suffolk, who is bigging up the new. This is a Ukrainian company that is localizing manufacturing in the UK, obviously to keep their manufacturing safe from being bombed by the Russians. So Ukrainian drone manufacturer Uspec Systems has opened a drone manufacturing plant in the UK. Let's see what your man has to say.
Drones are transforming warfare.
Tonight, President Zelensky said his forces used 117 drones in strikes on Russian air bases from deep inside Russia itself.
And we as a country need to seize that opportunity, not just to transform our own armed forces, but to boost our local economy. Because I'm standing here in Suffolk, in this factory, where a Ukrainian drone company has invested to create jobs and to build cutting-edge drones like this, which have been used in Ukraine. So this is a partnership between Ukraine and the UK, and it will bring prosperity, but also add to the capability of the British Army and our own military. When I was Defence Minister, I did the first ever drone strategy in the Ministry of Defence, and I was passionate about the idea that whilst we were supporting Ukraine, providing drones into Ukraine, that we should in parallel learn from that to develop a UK sovereign drone industrial base. And this is what we are seeing today here in Suffolk and when I visited Evolve elsewhere in the UK. So it's really important that we keep investing. We need to see the British Armed Forces procuring drones at scale for the Army and also for the Navy and the Air Force. But in particular, I think it's really heartwarming to see a partnership with a Ukrainian company, because we didn't want war to happen in Ukraine, and we need to keep supporting.
So unfortunately, it cuts off there, but we didn't want war to happen in Ukraine, but we are going to keep supporting them and learning from the whole war experience. So that's really good news. Then we hear about this. This is the Terrorhawk. I don't know if anyone remembers the old puppet show Terrorhawks, a bit like the old what's the Anderson puppet show? This is my multiple sclerosis getting the worst of me. Anyway, the one where they go and say, you know, come on, tell me, the old puppet show with the 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5. Actually, 4 was the underwater one. Anyway, Terrorhawk was an equivalent one made in space. It was made a bit like Thunderbirds. Thank you. Oh, I can't believe I just couldn't think of that word. Thunderbirds with, you know, Lady Penelope and whatnot. Was it the same studio that made Terrorhawk? Anyway, Terrorhawk was like a 1980s one that was made that was really cool. I used to watch it as a kid. Anyway, this is called Terrorhawk, and I wonder if it's an homage to that. Anyway, the 156th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment of the Ukrainian Air Force has received British Terrorhawk Paladin anti-aircraft systems, says Militiani, and it might have had it for like 2 years. Britain's Terrorhawk Paladin confirmed operating with Ukraine's 156th 2 years after delivery. The autonomous 30mm system engages Russian Shaheds and Lancets without exposing crews. Okay, this is very cool. We haven't really heard much. I think I remember reporting on this literally a couple of years ago. Let's find out a little bit more about it. The system is built on a MAN HX chassis, but it can also be unloaded if needed. The video shows shielding panels installed on the radar for additional protection. There you see it. So I guess this is palletized. You can take that technically off the back, a bit like the Skynex system we talked about earlier. Now, the system uses an autocannon with a caliber that can be adjusted according to customer requirements. The base version is a 30mm Mark 44 Bushmaster 2, which has been supplied to Ukraine. A 40mm cannon can also be installed. In addition, the Terrorhawk Paladin is equipped with sensors and a 360-degree radar, enabling it to detect, track, and destroy aerial, ground, and maritime targets at short range. The Terrorhawk systems was developed by MSI Defence Systems. Their transfer to Ukraine as part of a UK assistance package was reported in October 2023. The number of systems supplied was not disclosed. I'd love to know more about this and see that in action, but interesting that we haven't really seen any of this any of these used previously. There's no kind of video evidence other than what we've kind of seen there. Just having a little look at the, yeah, here we go. Terrorhawks was a 1980s British science fiction television series created by Jerry Anderson. So it was the same. Jerry Anderson was the guy behind the Thunderbirds as well, and Christopher Burr for London Weekend Television. LWT, do you remember the LWT in the tricolour? The letters for that. Anyway, I'm just going back to 1980s British television at the moment. So yeah, I should probably shut up now. Okay. What I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to go back to going over on that side. I'm going to show you a little bit from Wes O'Donnell's recent video. It's nothing we didn't know here. I mean, his whole video was a secret delivery of 99 huge howitzers to Ukraine. It wasn't really a secret delivery. We know exactly what went on here, but I think there's freedom of information request to the UK that has formally seen the UK government formally admit that we have sent indeed the entirety of our AS-90 self-propelled howitzer stocks. Nonetheless, it's an interesting video that he's done here. He's talking up the AS-90 and kind of where it sits and why it's pretty useful, although it does have a crew of 5, which is a bit of a drawback. One of these old school ones. Now you're saying things like the RCH-155, the new boxer chassis one that the British and Germans are going to be building and using, and actually some are going to Ukraine have a crew of 2, and actually the future proofing themselves. It's called the RCH-155 because it stands for remote controlled howitzer. Eventually it can and probably will have a crew of 0, at least in the vehicle itself. But anyway,
AS-90 has already moved. Britain was already in the process of replacing the AS-90s with The Archer system, a Swedish-designed, of course it's Sweden, howitzer built for the next era of artillery combat. It shoots faster, and it automates more of the crew workload. Once Archer began arriving, the AS-90s were pushed toward retirement. They were going to be mothballed, scrapped, or sold off, but London chose a fourth option: send them to Ukraine where they could finish their service life in the fight they were built for. The FOIA documents confirm what analysts had suspected since mid-1924. Every active AS-90 crossed the channel and entered Ukrainian service. Some of the retired AS-90 hulls were shipped also, almost certainly to be stripped for parts. Ukraine has mastered this practice. They have rebuilt NATO artillery with 3D printing, field machining, improvised parts, and a level of inventive stubbornness that makes old retired Cold War engineers point at the screen like that Leonardo meme. Ukraine operates in both the Soviet and the NATO artillery worlds. On the Soviet side, they still use systems like the 2S3 Akatsiya and the 2S19 Mista, reliable, battle-proven, and well understood. On the Western side, they now field the M777s, the French Caesars, the German PZH-2000s, and a growing family of NATO 155mm system. The AS-90 fits snugly in the middle of that ecosystem. It's faster than the Mista, more durable and less temperamental than the PZH-2000, significantly easier to maintain than the Caesar in muddy terrain, sorry France, and fully compatible with NATO ammunition. It was designed to survive winter, mud, and grit, and all the nasty things that the UK experiences in their field winters, and soldiers who occasionally swear at hydraulic systems. In short, the AS-90 is a blue-collar NATO gun. It shows up, it works long hours, it refuses to quit, and it does not need a climate-controlled hangar to stay operational. Now, Russia fields three broad categories of artillery. Their old but reliable systems include the 2S3 and the 2S19, just like Ukraine, which form the backbone of their fires doctrine. Their upgraded systems feature improved barrels and digital fire control, but remain limited in number. And then there's the Koletsya SV, which looks like the future on paper, but exists in Russia in quantities you can count on two hands. When both sides use extended range shells, range becomes less decisive because the top systems perform similarly. The real edge comes from fire control networks, drones feeding targeting data, sensor fusion, shoot and scoot speed, survivability, and ammunition logistics. Ukraine's edge lies in precision guidance, rapid sensor-to-shooter loops, and integration with Western fire control systems. Russia's edge lies in sheer volume. They have more barrels and massive Soviet-era ammunition stockpiles. The AS-90 gives Ukraine something it needs: tempo. It can fire quickly, it can relocate, and integrate seamlessly into drone-fed targeting cycle. But a howitzer is only as good as the supply chain behind it.
So on and so forth. So, you know, I don't think it's fair for me to play any more of that, but really good stuff from Wes O'Donnell. And the good thing about the AS-90 is that it's got the ability to, as with a number of these different systems, including like the Archer and the Caesar, even the AS-90 can fire 3 shells and have them land simultaneously. I forget what it's called, simultaneous munition, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I presume it fires one, you know, that trajectory, and then one at that, and then one at that. And then they all land at exactly the same time and cause even greater devastation. The AS-90 can do that. So it's a decent enough bit of kit. We've given all of our AS-90 now to Ukraine. There's now formal confirmation of that. So they've had, you know, a good 100 of these, and they have lost a fair few of them. But, you know, they are, as you'd expect, they are being used well by the Ukrainians. They're quite well regarded. They do have a crew of 5, though, so that is a bit of a disadvantage there. Okay, now we staying on the UK topic. The UK is preparing to spend more than £100 million, on about $130 million, to cover the initial cost of sending its forces into Ukraine if a ceasefire agreement is reached. But of course, that ceasefire agreement, as it stands with the 28-point plan, would require no NATO forces to be in Ukraine. That's a stipulation from the Russians, i.e. from the Americans. Russians, identity crisis. So I don't know what that says about all of these arrangements, and I don't know, you know, there's supposed to be this robust security guarantee from the 28-point peace plan. But then we hear more recently that the US actually hasn't committed to having their troops being involved at all. And so, you know, how robust is a plan if there are no foreign troops in Ukraine, and Ukraine has to get rid of half of their army, and they can't have diplomatic flights sent over, and they can't have weapons that can be sent deep into Russia, and blah blah blah. And you're thinking, wow, Ukraine appeared to be completely emasculated, and the security guarantee is appearing to be more and more diluted with each passing day. Anyway, okay, now let's go. If you're saying my my audio levels are on a low side, I can try and turn off the automatic volume adjustment and just whack it up a bit. It's hopefully, is that any better? I don't know if that's any better for you. Right, the Royal Navy has ordered Dragonfire laser systems for its Type 45 destroyers. This is something we heard about previously, and I have been asked about this a number of times actually over the last few weeks, to be honest. This is something that was, I think, in line for the Royal Navy to get. It's more of a naval thing to keep our ships safe from smaller drones. With, I believe, when I last sort of read about it, it had a 1 kilometer range, and is exceptionally cheap to operate. I don't know how much it's costed to develop, but supposedly like is it £1 or 10p even to fire one of these things, and it can hit, you know, like a £1 coin. That's that kind of accuracy at a kilometer. Now, the Royal Navy has ordered Dragonfire laser systems for its Type 45 destroyers, which shot down a drone traveling at 650 kilometers an hour during tests. Wow. So that's a very, because I was wondering exactly about this. These kind of laser systems, you can imagine, will be quite good if it can like stay on a drone for a couple of seconds that's moving, you know, fairly slowly, so it can stay on it until the laser makes it catch fire and then come down. But to hit something going 650 kilometers an hour is incredibly useful. So MBDA has been awarded a $316 million contract to supply the Royal Navy with new Dragonfire systems. So very cheap to fire. Sounds like they're pretty bloody expensive to do R&D and then buy. But anyway, do you know that I've never sees a single Sisu in Norway? I don't know what Johnny Nevergod is seeing. The new Sisu, there's a Finnish film called Sisu, which is kind of almost like a slapstick, violent war film set in World War II. Sisu, you can go and find it. I think it's on Netflix. And you got this old guy that's sifting for gold, and he loses everything. Or this Nazi platoon basically comes across him, and it's this long, or it's not long, but it's this protracted sequence of basically him killing Nazis. And it's brilliant. It's just a great bit of like, it's not that he's immortal, he just refuses to die, is I think the tagline type thing, or what someone says in the film. Anyway, Sisu 2 has just got the sequel to that has just come out, or is coming out, and it features him not killing Nazis but actually killing Soviets now over in Karelia, where they've like destroyed his house. So he takes all the wood from his house, and then it's all the inventive ways he can kill Soviet soldiers now with bits of wood and all sorts of crazy ways of them dying. I think it was a TM62 mine, or like anti-tank mine, blowing someone's head off in the first one, and just obviously very violent, but in a kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of way. A ridiculous film. But the Sisu 2 one has just been made with $11 million of budget, and I think that's like the most expensive Finnish film ever made. It's like made with peanuts. Like 11 million in film terms is nothing. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It's supposed to be, a pretty enjoyable romp. Audio is worse now. I'll switch back to how it was then. Anyway, that's one to look out for, Sisu, if you want to. Right, I'll switch it back to automatic volume adjustment. Yeah, it could just be the video I was playing previously. Okay, So anyway, that's a Dragonfire, but we're going to see a little bit more Dragonfire. So this is newly released. The reason I've mentioned Dragonfire, and you might say, who cares? So this is British military procurement, but actually there was rumor, or I don't think it is more formal than rumor. I'm pretty sure we were giving Dragonfire to the Ukrainians, possibly to test it. I mean, there's no better testing place than Ukraine at the moment for weapons like this. But anyway, newly released footage of UK's Dragonfire laser weapon system engaging drones at a test range. The Royal Navy confirmed it will be deploying them on its ships within 2 years. So here it is. That is the Dragonfire. And you can see it sort of moving there. You're assuming it is burning up whatever it's lasering there. But my goodness, are we entering the future? Is this science fiction? Are we here now? Is this is James Bond actually coming true? There you go. You got laser weapon. Next thing, that will be going between James Bond's legs, and we'll be seeing that anyway. Reference to one of the old Bond films there, but Sean Connery. Right. Okay. Now we're going to go on to. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. We're going to be going on to the indigenous production inside Ukraine of weapons and whatnot. Right. So you guys talking about Sisu in the live chat there. Sorry, I do. I love Johnny Nevergard. Lol, JP refusing to die is a typical Finnish behaviour. They say that Sisu is this word that doesn't have a translation, and it's just kind of like I guess refusal to die. It's just like grit and determination. And whatnot. So yeah, anyway, go and watch Sisu and check it out. Yeah, watch it. Tongue is firmly in the cheek for it. But if you like to watch a war movie where a relatively old guy, apparently the guy is as well, the guy that acts it is this. He basically says nothing in the films, like either of the films. But he is a theatre trained actor. He's like a quite highfalutin actor, and in the films he's just being this brutal murderer of horrible foreign soldiers and whatnot. Anyway, again, I am digressing. Sorry, not sorry. Greece. So this is in the Ukrainian section, but actually it's because it's the co-production and localization of building. So Greece and Ukraine will jointly produce advanced naval drones at Greek shipyards, likely at Scaramanga. We back in James Bond. According to Katimirini, that's a Greek media outlet. The drones, upgraded versions of Ukraine's proven models, will be built with Greek and Ukrainian tech, including optics, electronics, and potentially munitions. So here we have a bit of an infographic showing what they may be making. Sort of the Magura we've heard about, the Katran I was reporting on recently in the Sea Baby. Sea Baby was kind of like the original one, wasn't it? And then we've got Magura V up to like V9 is it at the moment being talked about. Anyway, a bit more information from the Euromaidan press here. Months of secret talks. So this has been the culmination of months of secret talks leading to a naval drone deal between Greece and Ukraine. The confidential agreement provides for the establishment of a new production line at Greek shipyards capable of building advanced unmanned platforms for supply to both Ukrainian and Greek armed forces. And Greek companies participating in the program will provide electronic systems, optical equipment, sensors, and if necessary, explosive materials. Athens and Kiev have also discussed expanding cooperation in unmanned underwater vehicles should the USV, the Surface Vehicle Program, continue. Ukrainian defense technologies have been described as highly dynamic, with operational tactics updated roughly every 7 days to counter Russians' rapid advances in aerial drones and other unmanned systems. The Greek military delegation and representatives from the shipyard hosting that assembly line are expected to visit Ukraine soon to advance the deal. It has reportedly followed months of confidential consultations. However, the reaction from Russia has been that, according to Militiani, they have threatened to respond to agreements between Greece and Ukraine on the production of naval drones. And this is stated in a statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry. Quote, such agreements may have negative consequences for relations between Russia and Greece. Do you know what? Who gives a damn? Stop your saber rattling. No one cares. Right. Fire points. So we're getting on to some pretty chunky information regarding Firepoint, although they are associated with the guy that's at the heart of the corruption scandal. Firepoint are ploughing on and continuing to come up with the goods, it seems. Firepoint plans to deploy its FP7 ballistic missile this year with a 200-kilometer range and 1,500 meters per second speed and a 14-meter circle error probable. So just to remind you, circle error probable means that 50% of the time it lands within 14 meters of the target, 50% of the time it can land anywhere you like. That's, I guess, at its worst, and you can still say it's got a CEP of 14 meters. Essentially, what you really be looking for is 100% of the time these things land within 14 meters. 14 meters does give it quite a bit of wriggle room to not be as precise as you would like. I think is a CEP for a HIMARS, regular HIMARS 84-kilometer missile, is that sort of 1 meter? Certainly within 10 meters. So 14 meters isn't like the best, but it's pretty damn good considering you've just created this from scratch. And actually with a 150-kilogram warhead is, so if you think of an Iskander M, I think has a 480-kilogram warhead. So it's not a very big missile, but this is the 200-kilometer range one. So this is your short range ballistic missile. I know Berthold's actually in the live chat, and we had an argument as to whether an ATACMS is a ballistic missile or whether it's a quasi-ballistic missile. I would maintain it is a ballistic missile, and ballistic is to do with a number of different conditions, but it's essentially the trajectory. And your short-range ballistic missiles won't go into the Earth's atmosphere, but other longer-range ones will often go into the Earth's atmosphere and then come back down out of it. And it's about that trajectory that essentially you don't really change it while it's in air doing its thing, whereas a cruise missile flies horizontal to the parallel to the Earth and much lower down, and actually is much slower, but you can generally change its course, and it cruises along, and you can move it and therefore kind of evade air defenses and whatnot. Ballistics are slightly different, obviously. So this one has 150 kilogram warhead. It's now in mass production. So that is good. And that is set for the end of this year. So missile within this year. So we might see ballistic missiles coming from Ukraine that aren't just the ATACMS, possibly the FRIM-2 or the GROM-2. Could be having the FP7 by the end of the year. But then we go back to the question, the conversation about, well, what if there's a deal signed next Thursday? What does this mean about they've spent all this time getting these ballistic missiles, and you're thinking, yeah, now we can see them really put some pressure on the Russians, and then suddenly they can't use them. And then you've got the longer range FP9 missiles, so it goes from 200 kilometers to 850 kilometers. That's set for turning up in mid-2026, and it's also producing 3 Flamingo cruise missiles daily. So those are the big Flamingos that we've seen. This one here. Apparently, they are producing FP5s at the rate of 3 a day at the moment. So that means 21 a week. So we should be expecting to see Ukraine fire 21 FP5s a week. Now, we have been led to believe that they have been used against targets inside Russia recently, but yeah, should be 21 a week. Good stuff. Okay, the Defense Forces first used the Ukrainian FP5 Flamingo cruise missile in the spring of 2025, but currently such missiles are still experimental weapons, according to the General Staff. So the General Staff has come out and said, well, yeah, okay, they're making 3 a day, but they're still experimental. In other words, they're still, I assume, playing around with how effective they are and what the technology on board them is, and so on and so forth. There's a piece in the New Voice of Ukraine that says Ukraine's Flamingo cruise missile sees wider use. Firepoint, the Ukrainian manufacturer for the FP1 and 2 long-range drones and the FP5 Flamingo cruise missile, held a closed-door briefing for journalists and experts, during which it showed classified footage of its weapons in action. And so you can't see the footage, but they have shown it to journalists. An NV journalist who attended the event said the video contains details of the FP1 and FP2 drones never disclosed before. Most of the footage focused on drone operations and targeting capabilities, though Firepoint declined to release further specs for security reasons. The briefing also touched upon the manufacturing and launches of the FP5 missiles. According to the footage, the Ukrainian military conducted numerous operational Flamingo launches rather than a handful of tests. Viewers saw aftermath of FP5 strikes that had not been previously reported, including the destruction of key Russian weapon systems. Wow. Now, could that be that big launch site of their Oreshnik that may have been hit sometime back? Could that be like what Iskander launch systems? I don't know. But destruction of key Russian weapon systems, that sounds pretty exciting. Those losses, the company suggested, could weaken Moscow's ability to target Ukrainian territory. Firepoint said it may publish the footage or selected clips in the future. Well, we've just seen that I showed you at the beginning of the video, the FP1 drone taking out a Mi-8 helicopter. Anyway, in early September at the MSPO Defense Expo in Poland, Firepoint announced development of two new indigenous ballistic missiles, the FP7 and 9. As we talked about already, you know, they have the FP9 is equipped with an 800 kilogram warhead. Wow. So that longer range one. So you've got the 200 kilometer FP7 with a 105 kilogram warhead, but the FP9 has an 800 kilogram warhead. That's double the Iskander almost. That's significant. Designed to strike targets up to 855 kilometers away. Now, that's not going to be seen till mid 2026, but my goodness, if Ukraine was to have access to that now, my goodness, you know, the whole Trump saying, well, Zelensky doesn't have any cards. I beg to differ. I beg to differ anyway, because actually they've been hitting the crap out of Russia's hydrocarbons industry, but they could be doing even more if they had access to that kind of ballistic missile. You've got to remember that Russia's been using ballistic missiles, you know, they're 10 a penny for the Russians, really, over the course of the war. And Ukraine, yep, they've used some ATACMS now and again, but my goodness, had Ukraine had the access to the weapons that Russia has, this would be a massively different war, wouldn't it? Right, then we get some stats on the FP1s and, yeah, the FP1s. So these are your longer range drones. I shared this with you in my hits and losses video this morning. FP1, Firepoint FP1 drones account for 56% of targets hit by Ukrainian long-range drones and 51% of those launched. In other words, about half of the drones launched, long-range drones launched, you've got Lyuty drones, you've got, I don't know if Beaver, the Boba drones are long-range, or whatever are the long-range drones. You're talking about the AT2, the kind of ones based on those planes, the Foxbat planes as well. Anyway, you've got a range of these long-range drones. 51% of those that are launched are FP1s, and 56% of the targets that are then hit are FP1s. In other words, the FP1s are, it looks like, the most accurate, or at least they're more accurate than the. Yeah, it seems like they're more accurate than their competitors. Then the General Staff go on to say that the FP1 costs 3 times less than, say, the competitor, the Lyuty. Here's the FP1. The Lyuty looks pretty similar to this. It's a bit bigger than this, and it has landing gear. This doesn't have landing gear. It kind of launches off a static launcher, and then, you know, goes the distance, going for speed, going the distance, going for speed. A bit of cake there for you. Anyway, that is a really good stat to know that these are cheap as chips, comparatively speaking, and they are more effective. So there you go. Main drones use Firepoint, and you've got other ones there. So 51% of the drones used, and Fire Missions using basic drones. So I presume the translation there is 59%. I don't. Maybe that's not the success rate there. I don't know. Anyway, there's some bar chart. There's some pie charts for you. Right. Anyway, moving on. I'm glad someone got my reference there. Loves me some cake. Thanks, Ronan Rugby friend there from Canada. Okay, so we have production of the Ukrainian Seawolf surface drones will be launched in Poland. So we've seen the announcement concerning Greece. Now we've got localization of production for a Ukrainian piece of kit in Poland that will keep it safe, of course, from being hit in strikes, as part of investments by Norwegian defense giant Kongsberg. These are the people that help make the NASAMS and other bits of kit. This is reported by Defense 24. So that's pretty cool. What else do we have? Ukrainian armored vehicle maker Praktika has secured its first EU production deal, a 25,000 square meter facility in Spain. So Spain also involved in co-production and localization of Ukrainian gear. This marks the first joint armored vehicle production project with Spanish partners on European Union territory. Now, this must be what I was referring. No, it wasn't. It wasn't a Praktika one. I thought that they were making another infantry mobility vehicle there, but it says this is the first armored vehicle production project with Spanish partners. So maybe not. I thought the Spanish were making another Ukrainian one under license. I might have to go and check that out. Anyway, that's really good news. What else? Ukroboronprom, the state manufacturer, arms manufacturer for Ukraine, has signed an agreement with a Czech company, Air Team, on a joint development and production of air target interceptor technology. These technologies will be used to defend Ukrainian skies. So more co-production there. All of this happening, all of this looking good going forward. But of course, you know, the question is all about what happens if they're forced to sign this deal. Johnny Nevergard says Kongsberg also had a hand in the early sea drones. Hope they keep it up. Okay, we have news from Bloomberg that the Ukrainian drone interceptor, the P-1 Sun, is capable of speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour and altitudes of up to 5,000 meters. Drone can shoot down both Russian drones and helicopters. Goodness me, just get these all by the front line and take down some of those Ka-52 attack helicopters. Production of the P-1 Sun, thousands of units every month. So we're hearing what? The Wild Hornets one is being produced at pretty good rates. You've got the Octopus one that the UK is going to be producing at 2,000 a month. But then there are other manufacturers that have the blueprints for the Octopus one that is going to be producing it as well. There are 3 at the moment that I believe can produce it, and more coming online. And then you've got all these other producers of these interceptor drones. We've got the French, I think, are doing a bunch on that, and Germans too. So I wonder how many interceptor drones the Ukrainians will have to be able to fire on a given night in, say, I don't know, 6 weeks' time. I'd imagine they could, because, you know, these do a job. Obviously, what the challenge is going to be a bottleneck probably in operators, trained operators, and you know, launch capabilities and whatnot. Ukraine's P-1 Sun drone interceptor is now taking down Russian Shaheds developed by Skyfall. It's got speeds of up to 408 kilometers an hour. It's a fast, homegrown answer to Russia's kamikaze drones. So that's really good news. I mean, it says here that it's capable of 300 kilometers an hour. On the previous one, it says here 408 kilometers an hour. It's pretty quick. Now, I don't know any details about this, but Max25 just the other day said all the this is Militiani, so I should really go and research it on Militiani. All the Ukrainian defense forces have been equipped with the graphite system, which can be installed on a pocket device, I presume mobile phone, some kind of radio system, comm system, which then promptly informs the person about the invasion of the area, so the existence in the area of enemy drones and aerial bombs. So protective bit of kit there called the graphite that apparently all Ukrainian defense forces have been equipped with them. I mean, I doubt that's the case, but hopefully that will be widespread soon. And then the last bit in this section before we get into the final Russian section, Ukraine has cleared multiple producers to mass produce anti-drone rounds. I've talked about these previously. They need to have, like, there was talk about every soldier having like a magazine on them of anti-drone rounds that they can quickly put into their Kalashnikov or whatever, and then shoot down drones by having rounds that kind of act a bit more like shotgun rounds and spray out some kind of, you know, shrapnel or whatever. They've cleared multiple producers to mass produce anti-drone rounds that split mid-flight, boosting hit probability 2 to 3 times against Russian drones. The 5.56mm rounds fit standard rifles. Infantry can carry dedicated magazines and swap them in when drones appear. This, in my opinion, is like 2 years too late. But yeah, better late than never. Let's get them to Ukrainian forces as quickly as damn possible. Okay, I'm going to go to the final section of the video, but I'm just going to return to speaking to you guys a little bit and saying a bit of a thanks before we get on to the home straight. Thank you to Kevin, always thanking Kevin, aren't I? He's such a legend. Thank you, mate. Really do appreciate that. Johnny Nedregard, thank you and your Norwegian love there. Bit of flamingo reference in your super chat, so thank you, mate. Yes, Jesper Pettersson, thank you for becoming a member, total legend. Julian Rossiter, always a pleasure, never a chore, Julian. The current US administration reminds me of the last days of Caligula. I do get that sense too, mate. There are some striking similarities in both leaders and how they behaved. Do you know what my son, Oscar, so I drove him, I told you earlier, I drove him to football today. And he asked me, because I mentioned it came on the news. I was listening to LBC News, and they talked about the peace deal and how shoddy it was. I was listening to Sky News last night. I was watching Sky News, and it was really interesting. This is good news. This is, I like British mainstream media when it's not GB News, because actually they're starting to say it like it is. And Sky News was saying that essentially they weren't beating about the bush. They were saying, from their own kind of analysis, their own reporting, that the 28-point peace plan is just a surrender document. They weren't saying like some people are saying this and this is how some people are reacting. Literally, the reporters were like, this is a surrender document where blah, 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 blah. I was like, yeah, damn straight. You need to say it like it is. It is exactly what it is. And thank you for reporting it in that manner. I really appreciated that. And there was no kind of dressing up what Trump was and Witkoff are trying to put on to the Ukrainians. But anyway, I was listening to LBC News driving my son back from football, and it mentioned Trump, and I was like, Trump, and Oscar is like, he knows my views on Trump, right? He was like, Dad, would you, if no one knew about it, would you shoot Donald Trump? Would you kill him if no one knew about it? Would you do that? And I was like, oh man, that's a question, dude. Because I've thought about that before with Putin. We may have even had this discussion in one of the previous lives I was doing with you. But I was like, oh my God, the fact that I'm thinking long and hard about that and I don't know how to answer that means that, goodness me, I'd be close to, it's all about consequentialist ethics for me. And it's like, but then it wouldn't, that would just ruin me as a human, thinking I'd be responsible for the death of someone. But then you're thinking, but then I'll be possibly responsible for the survival of all these other people who I think are going to die as a result of his shoddy foreign diplomacy, so on and so forth. Anyway, the current US administration does remind me of the last days of Caligula. There are some striking similarities in both leaders and how they behaved. Don't disagree, Julian. War of 1812, gifting A5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you very much indeed. War of 1812, you're a great supporter of the channel. Brownie, thank you very much for your support, mate. You look like you're enjoying that pint in your avatar. You lucky man. I can do with them on. My throat is feeling somewhat raw from too much talking to you guys. Never too much talking to you guys, as long as you're still there to listen. Ruth Wolfer, thank you for becoming a member. Thank you, Ruth. Great support of the channel. Lonely Avatar as well, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics, another Canadian supporter there. So that's really do appreciate it. There's a lot of Canadian love actually out there. Thanks, Canada. I do. It's one of those countries I've never been to. I was going to go and spend a year at Whistler snowboarding. And instead I went to New Zealand for a year there, and went to the Remarkables. Well, actually went all over New Zealand, had in fact spent most of the time in Paihia in the Bay of Islands, living on a beach, and didn't wear shoes for 3 months, and went and got a job in the New Zealand Qualifications Authority in Lambton Quay in Wellington, and put on shoes, start obviously having to wear shoes to go to work in the office. And then like I developed this just a whole like shoes worth of skin underneath from just walking on hot concrete for 3 months. And yeah, I just it's not very nice, but I just remember after wearing shoes for like 2-3 weeks, the entire bottom of my feet, a whole layer of skin, just thick skin, came off my feet. It was like, oh, we're not used to having shoes around us. We don't need this calloused undersole. Anyway, there you go. Good old New Zealand. Got a lot of love for New Zealand. One of my sisters is married to a Kiwi. He's a former Commonwealth Games gold medal winner. In fact, he got the record. He's won 3 gold medals in a day, I think, in the Kuala Lumpur Commonwealth Olympics for weightlifting. So anyway, there you go. One of my sisters married him. Right, let's go on and get into some of what Russia is doing. And we're going to start with Polymarket Intel here saying Russia's defense industry faces the worst crisis in 30 years. That is a pretty dire indictment of how things are going. Leaked internal documents reveal that Russia's military industrial complex is in its deepest crisis since the 1991 Soviet collapse, despite a surge in orders from the Ukraine war. Key problems are an acute labor shortage, severe cash flow issues, and delayed payments. We heard today, I've reported on my hits and losses video, that a shipyard that's a defense military shipyard has not paid their workers for 2 months. We also hear that Yakutia is not able to pay their military, because I think it's all done by regions, and Yakutia can't pay special military operation operatives, basically soldiers from Yakutia. Incredible. Like things like, honestly, Russia is on its knees, I think, economically speaking. And it's at that point that Trump goes, oh, let's let Russia off the hook and let's put this horrible deal in front of Ukraine, demand it signs it. And if it doesn't, we're going to screw them over, and we give all the concessions to Russia. Hang on, Russia they're in super trouble here. Like, oh my goodness, it is so annoying. Flight to Concord's legendary. Anyway, broken foreign supply chains due to sanctions as well. So effective flagship enterprises are Uralvagonzavod, so it makes T-72, T-90s and T-14 tanks, cannot secure imported thermal images for transmissions, a chronic worker deficit. United Aircraft Corporation, UAC, I think, Su-57, Il-76, etc., still heavily reliant on foreign avionics and engine parts. And Kronstadt makes the Orion and Sirius drones. Kronstadt was in trouble, yeah. Cut off from Western microelectronics and optics. Wasn't it just about to go bust, or has gone bust? One document states that even tanks delivered in January remain unpaid. The production collapse is now directly degrading Russia's combat capabilities on the Ukrainian front. If that is all true, and this is from leaked internal documents, then what the hell are we doing allowing Russia off the hook here? It's so freaking annoying. Scruffy Tales adds to what was said about ATPGEO, who provided these combat packs. They provided 1,000 combat trauma kits designed to save lives in the trenches. My wife works in the ER and says that the content in the bags is excellent. Was it you, Scruffy, that was doing fundraising for them as well? I don't know. I seem to remember you talking about them on your videos. Anyway, I digress. Entrepreneurs from Uzbekistan are bypassing sanctions, according to Militiani, and they've established supplies to Russia of cotton pulp necessary for the production of gunpowder and solid rocket fuels. So that's really, really frustrating. Yeah, via my Patreon. So if you can check out Scruffy Tales of Warzone, always check out his videos. If you haven't subscribed to Scruffy Tales of Warzone, do it now and get his frontline updates. I'm so slow with them. He's much better. He's just better at them as well. Just go and please subscribe to him and support him, and his Patreon there supports that initiative. So anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, Belarus, using equipment purchased in China, has established the production of 152mm artillery shells and 122mm rocket shells for Russia. So Belarus now helping out Russia, as it appears that Russia is struggling to get that ammunition from North Korea. So North Korea was providing, I don't know, different claims, maybe 60%, maybe even more, maybe less of Russia's overall artillery ammunition was being provided by North Korea. But last month they had no containers going from North Korea. I think this month there have been some, but it's way down. And it appears that North Korea is unable to provide as much to Russia as Russia has been receiving. So they need to get that from somewhere. So it's going to be interesting to see if Russia is going to suffer from an ammunition shortage. And the worm will have turned if that was the case. Bit of a switcheroo there. Okay, coordinator of Ukraine's POW treatment HQ, Russia has forcibly mobilized over 46,000 Ukrainian citizens from occupied territories into its armed forces. As a result, approximately 1 in 6 captured Russian soldiers turns out to be a Ukrainian citizen. That's absolutely staggering. And we hear that I think 35,000 were from Crimea. Is that not correct? Just incredible. Statistics and a real sad state of affairs where they are getting an awful lot of soldiers to fight for them who are fighting against their own country. Really, really, really shocking. As Viggo says, North Korea's depleted their stockpiles. Now they only give some of what they produce. And of course, they're always worrying that they're going to be going to war with South Korea. So they need to keep pretty solid stockpiles themselves. Now, we hear that Dudazal Zuma, the daughter of former South African President Jacob Zuma, and a current member of parliament, has recruited approximately 20 young men from South Africa and Botswana who ended up on the front lines in Ukraine after being promised bodyguard training jobs. This is a bit controversial. So she's been involved in recruiting men from South Africa and Botswana to fight in the war against Ukraine, according to Bloomberg. And she's a member of South Africa's parliament, convinced at least 18 young Africans that they would be trained as bodyguards, and then they end up fighting as bodyguards for her father's party. Mokonso, anyway, that I don't know if there's some spelling issues there, but anyway, her father's party. According to relatives of the victims, the young men signed military contracts written entirely in Russian, after which they were sent to Russia. There, they ended up on the front lines. In August 2025, they lost contact with their families. Relatives of the recruited Africans claim that Dudazal Zuma assured them that they would not be sent to the front lines. However, after the families inquired about the whereabouts of their relatives, she ignored them for a long time. Recruiting South African citizens to participate in a foreign war has been a criminal offence since 1998. Against this backdrop, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa ordered an investigation, and Jacob Zuma, her father and former RSA president, appealed to Russian Defense Minister Belousov to return 18 South African citizens from the front lines. Zuma is known, the daughter is known for her active support of Russia. The politician regularly posted photos with dictator Putin, commented on international events with pro-Russian narratives, and criticized Cyril Ramaphosa for interacting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. She's currently on trial on charges of treason for inciting violence on social media in 2021, with about 350 people were killed in riots after her father was sent to prison for contempt of court. So there is that. That's frustrating. And then lastly, we have this statement from the French defense minister, saying today Russia produces more defense equipment than it consumes on the front lines. It is clearly preparing for something else. There's long been this theory that Russia isn't committing all that it manufactures to the front lines. It's building more tanks than you're seeing on the front lines. What is going on there? Collectively, Europeans are much stronger than Russia. That is why I think we must not be pessimistic. So he's saying, look, Russia is planning something. They're building stuff that isn't being committed, but stop being so down on our European capabilities and capacities. We're better than that, and we're better than Russia. I fully agree with that, by the way. I think if Russia went to war with the rest of Europe, Russia would last just a couple of days. I think Poland could defeat Russia in the blink of an eye, but certainly if you're not including the Navy. So, yeah, I just think we need to, if you haven't checked out my interview, it's still probably relevant, actually. Wenzel Coxswain says, my interview with Philip Abaji Jr. is very good. It is really good. Not my interview, but like he was really, really interesting. Well worth listening to. Talking about how Russia is involved in the Sahel region of Africa and how there's this migrant passage that they are convincing Africans to go on that takes them up through into Libya and then into Europe to try and put strain on Europe in terms of immigration and whatnot. So yeah, go and check out my interview with Philip Abaji Jr. Right, I think that kind of brings us to the end of what has been a bit of a meander through the meadows of military hardware. I think that is an incongruous metaphor. What else do we need to discuss other than to say thank you very much for those other very kind supporters of the channel? Please Feed Me Poop says, come to Canada. You have a place to stay in BC, British Columbia. Also, the Poop Files are a Democrat hoax. So yes, don't get me started on the Epstein Files. Thank you very much, by the way. Please Feed Me Poop. And thank you. I've been offered very kind accommodation all over the place, you know, up in Scotland, Canada, all over. Stephen Bendal, I must speak to you. I gave you a thanks on Buy Me a Coffee this morning or today, and I managed to fail to interview you while you were in Kiev. He's got a Ukrainian wife and he was over there for 3 weeks, and I meant to, we just, it didn't work yet again, but I'll happily do a live stream or pre-record or whatever. If you want to have a beer and a chat, we can talk about your experiences and what you picked up from being in Ukraine. But thank you as ever for your consistent support. Putin Puppet. Possible Putin now presses Trump with the Epstein files received from Epstein before the 2018 Trump-Putin meeting. Yep. Where Epstein explained handling Trump. Yep. I really think it's pretty plausible that via Epstein, Putin has some compromise on Trump. I really do think, you know, it's as plausible as not. The United States has, or the Trump administration has, flip-flopped yet again, and you wonder how much pressure is being put on Trump directly by, you know, the Russians. It just seems bizarre that it's all seemed to be going in much more of a pro-Ukrainian direction, and then out of the blue, this happened. This 28-point peace plan that was cooked up by Steve Witkoff, was cooked up by Kirill Dmitriev and the Russians, delivered to Witkoff. Witkoff, look, this is my thesis, as I said yesterday or earlier this morning in a video I put out just after midnight. I think, you know, you look at the language that's been analyzed that seems to have some Russianisms in it. So it seems to be a Russian document that's been Google translated by Witkoff or for Witkoff. Witkoff then reads down and goes, yeah, it sounds pretty good to me. I mean, it's all completely pro-Russian. And then before it even gets shared around the American administration, it gets leaked by Dmitriev to the press, which then Steve Witkoff accidentally acknowledges by saying, I think this was leaked by K, but then he deleted that because he thought that was a private message, and it wasn't. It was to the whole world. So then he said that and then deleted it. So he's then saying, so this is just fully played by Russia. So they deliver the 28-point peace plan to the US. Steve Witkoff doesn't give a shit about Ukraine, and nor does Trump. So he passes it by Trump, both going, yeah, screw Ukraine, don't really care. It gets this done really quickly, and it's completely pro-Russian, and there's no concessions for Russia. Really don't care, because they don't care one iota about Ukraine. And then just before they then pass it through to like the State Department and everyone else to go, who will then go, no, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. Kirill Dmitriev leaks it to the press, and then the US has to scrabble to say, okay, this was what was discussed. Yep, that is the plan. And so it forces the US hand. And now they're saying, now because it's out there, they're saying, yep, it's a plan. And yeah, these what's the next thing? Let's have a look. Oh, Thanksgiving. Yep. Zelensky, you've got to sign that by Thanksgiving. Isn't that next Thursday? Yep, that's next Thursday. Haven't you just screwed us over, and there are no concessions for Russia, and we have to do everything? We have to just bend over for Russia. Is that really where this is going? Yep, yeah, that's right. Did I say Thursday? Sorry, I'm not really hearing you here, but Thursday's the day, and that's, I think we're going to, what are we calling it, Steve? Steve, what's that? What's the name for that day? So we have like National this day and National that day. National Capitulation Day. So it's going to be Thanksgiving's now going to be called National Capitulation Day in honor of your total, complete and utter capitulation, Ukraine, to us, the Russian Federation. Oh, so no, we're not the Russian. We're the United States of America. That's it. You know, sorry. Sometimes I get confused. I just think we are the Russian Federation. So sorry. Anyway, yeah, that's my thesis about what's going on. I think it's pretty bloody accurate. Michel Deval, can we have a clear overview of what EU, Canada, Australia, Japan need to replace when we say the US goodbye? Now, I was listening to a bit on LBC News today, and I often talk to you about the consideration appears to be if Ukraine and allies cut the US off, what do they lose? Why do the Europeans keep going to the United States on bended knees and just go in front of Trump and say, please, daddy, come back to us, help Ukraine? What is it? What is the hold? And there must be something really considerable. Now, I talk about things like intelligence and satellite provision and so on and so forth. And many of you come back and say, hang on, Japan's got really good satellites, and France and the UK and I think the Nordic states are now developing more. Yeah, okay, yes. But like the guy on the military analyst on LBC News today was saying that the US just have things that they can't be replaced. In terms of that, intelligence sharing is really, really important. And that's going to include targeting for missiles. That's going to include all sorts of things. Now, maybe there is that provision to a degree from allies, but it's obviously not at the level that the US is able to provide. And there must be other things. I don't know what the answer is, but there is clearly a necessity for the US to remain inside the circle of allies. And if they are to be kind of jettisoned from this, either in a like, screw you, or in a, it's okay, mate, we'll take it from here kind of way, like hopefully in a way that still keeps them kind of on side and selling stuff to allies, there is still evidently something that is super important that the US provides. Because otherwise we would be like, we're okay, guys, we can do this ourselves. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, as Darren says, it's a photography. Yeah, the satellite imagery, I don't know. I think there probably is a lot in that, even though there are alternatives, they're not nearly as good. So anyway, that's enough from me. I really appreciate all your support. I don't know if there's anything else that I need share with you. I'm going to be speaking to my mate. I was supposed to be doing it today at 5, but I'm still going and I've screwed it up. But I will hopefully be speaking to my mate Ricky Johnson on my other channel, my philosophy channel. He was formerly of the Lastidian Church in the United States, and there's been this scandal, an abuse scandal. And it's really interesting to see how they are kind of victim blaming and responding to that. So on my philosophy channel, I'm going to be talking about that. If you want to hang out there tomorrow sometime, or maybe next week, we'll be doing that. Just give you a heads up for that. But thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for the mods there for keeping the threads so awesome and enjoyable for all of you guys to have your chat in. Please, if you're American, hit your senator or your representative with your opinion about the 28-point peace plan and how much it sucks. And I will get back to you tomorrow now with my usual hits and losses and content. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips to le monde.